Hi, Brandon Monroe here, and you're listening to the Bernie Breakdown. Another wild card weekend has NASCAR at two different tracks, the Truck Series at Mid-Ohio and the Xfinity and Cup Series at Atlanta. I'm Brandon Monroe, and, well, we got no one else here tonight. Unfortunately, Marky's flying back to his home, so we're going to have a little bit of a solo show. Should be a little bit quicker just because there's nobody to go back and forth with. So let's just jump right into it, starting with the Truck Series at Mid-Ohio, another road course for them as they come up in their stretch run for the playoffs. Only two races to go, Mid-Ohio and Pocono in a couple weeks as well. Looking at some of the odds here for the Truck Series. Again, road course, not a lot of Cup guys like you've seen in their previous road courses at Coda and Sonoma. Just them, so it kind of opens the door for a lot of different odds. So taking a look here at the favorites, Zane Smith and John Hunter Nemechek plus 400. Not too big of a surprise there with Zane Smith. John Hunter Nemechek hasn't really had the results I think he would be hoping for on these road courses. So at a plus 400, not so sure if that's going to be the pick to go with here for this one. Me personally, I'm looking at Zane Smith. He's run really good. Obviously, won Coda. Really good run at Sonoma. Did have to go up against Kyle Busch, probably prevented him from scoring the victory there. So even at plus 400, in my opinion, that's probably my favorite. I'm probably going to bet the favorite here. Go with the guy who's the top of the board in terms of the odds. Definitely take a look at Carson Hocevar. A couple weeks further away from that knee injury. Healing up a little bit. Plus 700, how he ran at Sonoma, obviously getting the pole there. Wouldn't be shocking to see him run well, especially with how he's done, as of late, even with that leg injury. Taking a look at some of these guys deeper in the pack in terms of long shots, Derek Kraus, he's kind of in a do or die situation here, given how many points back he is. A Matt Crafted going into this race for that last playoff spot, plus 5,000 with how he's been running as of late. Not a bad look. Matt Benedetto, good road course background, plus 4,000. Someone to take a look at as well. And I'll even throw Kaz Grala out there at plus 4,000, given how well he's done on the road courses. Somebody a little further up on the boards, that would be a long shot. Justin Marks obviously hasn't been driving a ton compared to what he used to, being, he's more focused on owning Trackhouse at this point in his career. But he has been doing a few races as of late. Did SRX last week at Stafford, also did a Trans Am race at Road America. Given that he has that road racing background, he does have a win here at Mid-Ohio in the Xfinity Series. Granted, it was a rain race. Plus 2,000 in a Nice truck that I would assume is going to be more along the lines in terms of equipment of, say, Carson Hocevar or when Ross Chastain drives for Nice. So, bit of long shot. I don't necessarily think I would take him at plus 2,000. That seems a little bit too high for me, just given how little he runs now. But since he has, experience at this track, which I think very few drivers do, he might actually be the only one who really does. It's something to look at. Again, not one of my slam dunk picks, as Marky would say, but something I would at least entertain, potentially, given that he does have a road racing background. Taking a look here at some head-to-head matchups, don't have a ton for the Truck Series, so we're going to go through all of them here. Got 4 from the looks of it that are on DraftKings right now, and starting off with Ben Rhodes and Carson Hocevar, both at minus 115. Don't really like where Ben Rhodes has been going as of late. Somebody that I thought was potentially trending towards contending for the regular season championship just a couple months ago has kind of taken a step back. Granted, a lot of the people in the Truck Series have. It's really Zane Smith, in my opinion, right now for the regular season championship, barring any problems. Everybody else really just jockeying for position. Carson Hocevar, he's knocking on the door of that win. I think just given how he's run the last couple weeks, his stock seems to be going up even with the injury issues, while Ben Rhodes seems to be going down. So for me, pretty easy pick. Give me Carson Hocevar in this matchup. Moving on to the second head-to-head, we have Corey Heim, Chandler Smith. This one, a little bit trickier. Both of these drivers have shown a lot of speed at times this year. Corey Heim, obviously, with 2 wins. Chandler Smith does have 1. But I think to kind of get an idea of what you're looking at with these guys, Chandler Smith did get a top 5 at Sonoma when the Truck Series were racing there. Now, Corey Heim did not race that due to the fact Kyle Busch being in the truck. So while I do like Corey Heim, he has tremendous upside, I feel like. Just the unknown of him at a road course. Only minus 110, Chandler Smith minus 120 here for the odds. I'm probably going to go Chandler Smith. This one really is, a coin flip. Get back to me possibly after practice and qualifying if Corey Heim can put up some good lap times, if he's running near, or around what Chandler Smith is. I could potentially flop on this one. But for right now, a couple days before the race, before any track time, anything like that, I'm going to go Chandler Smith, just the safer option here in this matchup. Next one, another one with Carson Hocevar, actually. So Hocevar, the favorite in this one at minus 130, Ty Majeski, even money. I get why Hocevar, would be favorited here. I'm actually kind of surprised he's not favorited in the matchup with Ben Rhodes. But Ty Majeski did have a top 5 run at Sonoma, finished 3rd there. I like Hocevar. I like how he's been trending, like I said before. But for this one, Ty Majeski seems like he's also, maybe not to where Hocevar is in terms of knocking on the door for one of these wins, but he's pretty close. And given the odds here, I'm probably going to take Ty Majeski at even money. Better value. I think these guys could be running near the front. I think they're probably going to be traveling behind Zane Smith. I think he's going to have a big day comes race day. But given the odds, Ty Majeski, even money, I think that is the way to go here in this matchup. And then the last one for the Truck Series, John Hunter Nemechek, Zane Smith. I think this is a no-brainer. Zane Smith, he's my pick to win the race. You know the rules here if you've been listening to the podcast all year. Pick the guy to win the race. Got to do it in the head-to-head matchup as well. So both guys at minus 115. I think that's a steal for Zane Smith. That's someone where if I'm handicapping this, I'd probably, even over John Hunter, have it at more of a minus 120 for him, maybe even a minus 130. That's how good Zane Smith has been running. He's almost in another zip code. And given that we're not having any, cup talent in this race since they're going to be over in Atlanta, I think there's a really good chance that this could just be a Zane Smith runaway come Saturday. Definitely the guy I have my eyes on for this race. Now, moving over to the fantasy side, just, given with no cup guys, that's really boosting some of the salaries here for some of these drivers. It makes it a little difficult because the salaries are going to be higher, and trying to put together that team, because if you want some of these, big name guys, that they're going to be a bit more expensive than they normally are. As for my team, just searching around, first one on the team, we're going with Colby Howard. It's really become that sort of value pick here in the Truck Series. A little bit of a question mark with his road courses, but at the end of the day, you need somebody to kind of fill that bottom rung, 6,500. My opinion, it's probably worth the shot. Again, not too thrilled about it. Did finish 19th at Sonoma. So if he could kind of give you that mid-pack run, assuming he qualifies there, gives you a positive point differential, it might not be a bad play to round out your team. Next up, 7,700, Derek Kraus. Again, not one that I'm necessarily thrilled with, but given the situation, he really does have to dig deep. He has to put together a good run if he wants to get himself in position to make the playoffs. Kraus did have issues at Sonoma, qualified 15th, ended up 27th. So again, not really a ton to go off of from there. Did have a little bit of a better showing at Coda, where he did end up finishing 12th. So kind of hot and cold with the road courses so far this year. But again, if you want to be, seen as a big time prospect, I think you have to have a big time moment. That's kind of where Derek Kraus is in his career. He kind of needs one of those big runs to just solidify his stock, which, we've seen he has the speed, questionable on some of the stuff he's done in the race car, but the speed's there. And if he wants to improve on that, kind of, make his name bigger than what it currently is, getting into the playoffs would sure do that. And he needs a big run at Mid-Ohio. So because of that, we're going to roll with Derek Kraus on the fantasy lineup as well. Next up, not really a surprise here, I think. Kaz Grala driving in for Young Motorsports this week. Road course specialist, hasn't had, the results I feel like we would expect from Kaz so far this year, but this is the same driver who did get a top 10 in his very first Cup start at the Daytona Road Course, driving for RCR when he had to sub for Austin Dillon. So when it comes to a road course, Kaz Grala, always somebody you got to keep an eye on. 8,000 salary, pretty solid. I know the equipment's not the best, but road courses are one of those tracks where it can be the great equalizers. So definitely somebody to take a look at there. Also, next up, Matt DiBenedetto, 8,200. He's kind of in a must-win situation. I wouldn't even say kind of. He is in a must-win situation. He's going to have to make something happen. Don't expect him to play for the stages. I expect him to play for the win, given how far back he is in points. So with somebody, being somebody that has had really good road course results in the Cup Series, someone that needs to do something real special here at Mid-Ohio to steal a playoff spot, 8,200 again, kind of a Hail Mary type play, I guess you could say. But I think for this race, for a fantasy team, you're going to have to build it along, with a lot of these guys that are going for broke and hope they hit. Because just the road course is really just a complete wild card. So Matt DiBenedetto, 8,200. He's on the team. Justin Marks, 8,600. Well, I'm not so sure about picking him for an outright win. A fantasy play does seem a little bit safer. Marks has had a bunch of success here. Obviously, we already mentioned that he won the Xfinity race here a couple years ago. Was in the rain, but given the road course background, I think it's worth the play in the fantasy. 8,600 is a bit pricey for him, not going to lie. But if you find a way to work him in like I have with this team, I think it's a no-brainer to put him on the team. And then rounding out my DraftKings fantasy lineup for the Truck Series, we have Zane Smith. 10,700. Again, I think this is going to be a big race for Zane Smith. I think this is someone who's going to go out there, potentially dominate. Maybe he'll have a couple of these guys that are hungry for a win, that need that win to get into the playoffs. Maybe John Hunter Nemechek will be there. But I think this is going to be a Zane Smith type of race. Wouldn't be surprised if he dominated leading, half the race, essentially. It could be one of those types of performances from our points leader in the Truck Series come Saturday. Just taking a quick look, too, at the points before we jump into the Xfinity Series here. It's, like I was saying, it's really just between Derek Kraus and Matt Crafton for that playoff cut line. 19 points right now. I know Derek Kraus really would love those 10 points that he lost for that penalty at Nashville, but he's not getting them back. He's going to have to make something happen. He doesn't necessarily need a win. They're in a tricky situation here. I think this could be one. If you don't think Matt Crafton has speed to win this race, if they start playing for the finishing position at the end of the race, I think if you are Derek Kraus, you got to go for the stage points here. 19 points is a decent chunk, but you have 2 races to make it up. So if you could play the stage point game here, get it, possibly down to single digits, even if you ultimately end up finishing behind Crafton, if you go out there and score 10 stage points, if you could chop that deficit down to, like I said, 10 points going into Pocono, which is another track given the size where you could possibly race it like a road course in terms of pitting before the stages and trying to accumulate stage points, you could get yourself into a situation where your head's up against him. Now, obviously, winning is the ultimate goal. That's what would, it's the only way that's going to punch your ticket to the playoffs right now. But I think you do need to pay attention to playing the points here. And if you watch the 88, if they're going to go for the win, if you think you could pick up the stage points while they're trying to play for a win, you got to do it. It's probably going to be the best way in terms of trying to cut that deficit down, because you could put yourself in a position where you could still finish behind him in game points. So Kraus not in a must-win situation. Winning would be ideal, but depending on how the strategies play out, look for somebody like him to maybe play the stage game instead of going for the outright win. Behind him, Tyler Ankrum, he's been running a lot better as of late. Matt DiBenedetto, Tanner Gray, all these guys have to win a race. There's no way that they're gonna race their way in on points unless Crafton and Kraus have catastrophic problems. Grant Enfinger edging back into this conversation. He does need a strong race, so he doesn't have to sweat at Pocono, especially if somebody like a Kraus, Ankrum, DiBenedetto, somebody like that back there does pick up the win. That way you're not sweating it in a battle with Crafton going into the last race of the regular season. But as of right now, he's okay. He's just got to have a good day at Mid-Ohio to avoid any problems. And then just taking a look, too, real quick here at the regular season championship points. Zane Smith, 21 points up on John Hunter Nemechek, 30 on Ben Rhodes, 35 on Chandler Smith. So really the four guys that are still in realistic contention. You can maybe throw Stuart Friesen and Ty Majeski in there. They're both 53 back, so not out of it, both within a race. But it's really those four. I think if Zane Smith just goes out there and has a good day, he should be pretty safe going into Pocono. If he goes out there and does what I think he's capable of doing, which is winning this race, he potentially could even lock it up before they even, start driving to Pocono in a couple weeks. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. A lot of points there on the line in terms of, playoff points for the playoffs when they start. So moving over to the Xfinity Series, a wild card race at Atlanta. Obviously, we know how the track ended up racing when they came here earlier in the year, much like a restrictor plate track. Probably expecting the same thing here on Saturday. Really, to me, it's just like a plate race. Really just a crapshoot. Somebody I do have my eye on, because he's probably going to want to make a statement, is Noah Gragson. Before we really start getting into picking, the results for the race and the fantasy teams and all of that, do want to make mention of that. NASCAR coming down today with a penalty on Noah Gragson for his incident with, I guess you could say, about half the field at Road America when he spun Sage Karam in retaliation for Karam running him off the track. Not gonna lie, when I first saw the penalty, I kind of looked at it and it kind of seemed like we have NASCAR just kind of picking, numbers out of a hat, and that's what the penalty was, and that's what they came up with. But when you really dive into it, I think the closest situation that you could compare this to would be Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski when they had their incident at Gateway in 2010. Very similar situation. We had two guys running hard. Granted, that was for the win, but two guys running really hard. Edwards doesn't like getting moved out of the way by Brad. He comes back, hooks Brad down the straightaway, causes a huge crash. The penalty from that was Edwards was docked 60 points and fined, I believe, $25,000. Now, Gregson's penalty was 30 points, $35,000. You could probably make a joke that, well, it's more money now because of inflation. Yeah, laugh it up. But, the points penalty, I did question that aspect. But when you look at it, when Carl had his issue with Brad, he cost Brad about 60 points. That's kind of where the number was, or kind of how they came up to that number in terms of the points docked. I think in Gregson's case, the amount of points that you have off there seemed to be the amount that he would have been docked had he been parked. They're not dog, but how much he would have lost. Had they said, no, your race is done, go pull in to where he actually finished, it was about a 30-point swing. So when you look at it like that, I'd say it's actually pretty consistent in terms of a similar situation in the past, which you don't normally see with NASCAR. So I do have to give them props to them. It seems like a pretty fair penalty, especially if you go back and look at it. And like they said, they didn't want to park Gregson there on the off chance that, yeah, there was something wrong with the car, and that's why he came back across the track and got into Karam and caused that wreck. So, they look at the car, they talk to him, they come up with that decision after the race, and I think fair is fair. I think, and for the people that say like, oh, that doesn't really affect Gregson, like he's in the battle for the regular season championship. A 30-point penalty there knocks you pretty far back, where you're only 39 points behind at that point. Now you're almost 70 behind, and that's going to be really hard to make up. Even though the Xfinity Series does have a few races left, I think they have probably about 8 now. But they still have a decent chunk before they get to the playoffs, and I think here with Gregson, that might be a little too much for him to overcome. They've kind of taken a little bit of a step back from where they were at the beginning of the season. They've had some issues, quality control, stuff like that. Having to run down Justin Allgaier, having to keep Josh Berry behind you, who's only going to be about 5 points behind you. Ty Gibbs obviously coming off of a win. Even AJ Allmendinger, who hasn't looked great outside of the road courses, I think that's going to be a really hard task. So it's a significant penalty. I mean, winning the regular season championship is 15 playoff points. That's equivalent to 3 wins. I don't think that could be stated enough. This is more, in my opinion, than a slap on the wrist. Will it get the point across to Noah? That's yet to be seen. But I think it's a fair penalty on NASCAR's part. I think it sends a message. Hopefully we don't see Noah Gragson do anything like that again. And now he has to, face the uphill battle of trying to win that regular season championship because of his actions. Again, I think he's going to go into Atlanta trying to make a statement. I think he's probably going to go out there and do everything he can to win this race. Still not going to pick him, though. I'm going to go with Riley Herbst. Yeah, bit of a surprise there, but he's just been pretty impressive so far this year, and I think going to a track like this, it is a plate track, kind of like an equalizer, because I do feel like, Riley Herbst is not on the same level as some of these other Xfinity drivers. He's definitely improved, and I think being a restrictor plate track, it's going to put him in a spot where it kind of closes the gap. Herbst did finish 4th here when they raced here in the spring. And I think, with the positive momentum he's had, he's coming off back-to-back top 10 finishes, 3rd at Nashville, 7th at Road America, qualified 1st and 3rd in those races. Did have a little bit of a rough stretch there in late May, early June. Although I think having a couple of weeks off there with the Xfinity Series schedule, how that lined up, did help him. You take away those bad races at Charlotte and Portland, his worst finish is 9th outside of those 2 races, dating all the way back to Martinsville. So he's been on a pretty good streak as of late. And I think given we're going to a track where, the equipment gap's going to be closed, plus 2,000, he's my long shot pick. He's my pick to win. Riley Herbst, first career win, punches his ticket into the playoffs and continues to improve on what has been his best season so far in NASCAR. Now, I don't have a true dark horse pick because Riley Herbst does fall into the parameters of that. I think you got to take a look at Sheldon Creed. That's somebody who they are in a do or die situation. We'll have one more crack at it in terms of a plate track at Daytona when we get to that at the end of August. I think we know how good RCR is on these tracks. Austin Hill, obviously, he won Daytona, was in position to win Talladega, got in a late wreck there. They have really good equipment, especially when it comes to these types of racetracks. Plus 2,500, I think, DraftKings here is playing the equipment for him because he has not run like he'd be plus 2,500 as of late. But given that it's a restrictor plate track, given that RCR has a good track record with this style of racing, that's not somebody that, it's not someone I would just throw away and not even take a look at, despite all the bad luck he's had. This is probably one of his last shots, like I said, to make the playoffs, given the hole he's in. It's going to go one to two ways. He's either going to go out there and deliver, or he's going to bring back the steering wheel in a wadded up race car. Again, could go either way, but at plus 2,500, you definitely want to take a look at that. A lot of head-to-head matchups right now for the Xfinity Series. Some that I would probably take a look at: Austin Hill, AJ Allmendinger. Austin Hill, even money, won at Daytona earlier in the year. I know AJ and Colleague, they run good on these plate tracks, but when you look at the driver lineup they have now, AJ Allmendinger, Landon Castle, and Daniel Hemrick, doesn't really pack the punch. Obviously, not having Justin Haley in these Xfinity races for them this year does hurt. But Austin Hill already has a win on the style of track, so I think he's probably the play here, especially at even money. If you could get somebody that has a plate win at even money for odds, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. So we're definitely going to go with Austin Hill there. Another one to take a look at, it's another Austin Hill one. Plus 100 Austin Hill, minus 120 Ty Gibbs. I know Ty Gibbs won here in the spring. I know he's coming off of a win at Road America. But again, even money for Austin Hill, in my opinion, is something you just can't, skip out on. RCR, a lot better, in my opinion, than Gibbs when it comes to the style of racing. Again, I know Ty Gibbs won here in the spring, but he had a very mediocre run at Talladega, in my opinion. Yes, Austin Hill did end up getting wrecked out in that race, but he was in position to win that race before he did. Didn't really see a lot of Ty Gibbs there. And, same thing at Daytona. I would say we saw more Austin Hill and the Chevys than you saw Ty Gibbs. So a bit of a, easy pick, in my opinion. And another easy one, it's really hard to kind of scroll through all of these when it is a plate track. But again, another one where you're getting better than even money here: Josh Berry over Ty Gibbs. Josh Berry did win a stage here before he was caught up in a wreck late in the race, in the spring race. Plus 105 to Ty Gibbs, minus 130. Again, just in my opinion, something you can't, miss on. If you're getting better than even odds at a plate track with quality drivers, obviously, if this was like, I don't know, Natalie Decker over Ty Gibbs and you're only getting plus 105, go with Ty Gibbs. But here, Josh Berry, plus 105. I think it's a no-brainer. Junior Motorsports, also very good at the plate tracks, and they did win with Noah Gragson at Talladega the last time we were at one of these. Taking a look at the fantasy teams. A little bit of a different idea here, just because of the salary. We're going with Ryan Vargas, assuming he makes the race. I think he will. I don't know for sure if that team's locked in or not. He's only 4,900. So it frees up a lot of salary to go with some bigger names. It is a plate track. If he could avoid the wrecks, that's a driver who could very well get you a finishing position better than where he qualified. He could get you positive points. So a little bit of a different play here. Ryan Vargas, 4,900. Obviously, this could change if for whatever reason he does not make the show. Next up, Jeffrey Earnhardt, 7,500. Not driving for Richard Childress like he did at Talladega, but he is coming off of a pretty good run at Nashville in the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing. Again, plate style racetrack. Jeffrey, he's an Earnhardt. He ran really good at Talladega, sat on the pole there, finished second. Ultimately, at the end of these races, it comes down to just missing the big one and keeping your car clean and surviving. But he did good enough at Talladega with RCR, where even though he's not driving for them in this race, 7,500, another one that kind of keeps the salary down. definitely somebody I'm going to have on the team. Next up, Ryan Sieg, 8,000. Was in position to win this race on the last restart. Ended up sliding back, did finish in the top 10. You've seen Ryan Sieg before have good runs at this style of racetrack. As a lot of underfunded teams, this is kind of like their chance to make a name for themselves. And I think Sieg, he was in position to win that race. Did come up a bit short in the spring. I think at 8,000, it's somebody that you could probably rely on being there at the end. Hopefully it ends a little better for him, but I think it's a pretty solid pick given the style of racing that we will be having. Next up, 8,200. Not quite a steal in my opinion, but since I did pick him to win the race, Riley Herbst. Again, I think maybe because it is a plate track, it's a situation where he doesn't have the results of some of the bigger name drivers that are on this team coming up next. Probably just bogs his salary down a little bit. 8,200. It's okay. I personally think it should be a little bit higher, but when you're trying to craft a team, you're going to take people that you think are undervalued, and Herbst at 82 does fit the mold there. Next up, Austhill, 10,300. Really good at Talladega. Obviously, one Daytona, no-brainer. Don't really need to touch much more on that. And then next up, lastly, Noah Gragson, 10,800. I think he's gonna make a statement. I don't know. I don't know if he's gonna win the race, but I think he's gonna go out there and just try to prove to everybody that this penalty doesn't matter to me. I'm still me. I'm gonna do what I have to do to win a race. Hopefully, he doesn't step over any lines. But Gregson at 10,800, bit pricey. We'll see how it goes, but I expect big things from him. Maybe not a win. Can't really say that for sure, given the situation that the type of race that it is, but he is also on the fantasy team for Saturday. So that brings us to the big race on Sunday in the Cup Series at Atlanta. We had a long and wild one here in the spring. William Byron ended up picking up the win. Not really feeling him for this weekend's race, though. At that point in the year, he was looking like, maybe he could be having a career season. One Atlanta, one Martinsville a couple weeks later. Really hasn't done a lot since. Outside of Darlington, where he got moved out of the way by Joey Logano, and he had a decent run going at Kansas before they had trouble with a tire. It's been rough. And at plus 1,200, I know he won the first race here. Not somebody I'm looking at in terms of going back to victory lane on Sunday. I don't think we're going to have a wild card winner. There are a lot of people down here that I think could be decent long shot picks. But I'm going to go with Ross Chastain. Ross was looking really good here before he had a tire issue in the first race. And then fought his way all the way back up into contention to win at the end. He ended up, I believe, getting credited with second after the Christopher Bell black flag for forcing Ross below the line. Going below the line, excuse me. But, I think second time around here, these teams, they're not going to be pushing the issue like they were before when it comes to, tires and the air pressures. I'm expecting to not see as many tire problems. We'll see. But I do like Ross. It is a plate race. Plus 10,000 or 10,000. That'd be amazing. I'd be betting a lot on Ross if it was plus 10,000. Plus 1,000 for Ross. It's about 10 to 1 odds there. Just, like his chances. Like I said, I think he was looking pretty good there in the spring before he had his issues. For me, no-brainer in the long shot category. Give me Brad Keselowski. Great on the plate tracks. Ran decent here at Atlanta in the spring. This was the race that they did end up picking up that 100-point penalty, so I'm sure that's something Brad would like to forget. But at plus 4,000, it's really hard, even the situation that he's in, to kind of go away from that, given how well he's raced at this type of track and in the past. The fact he's a former series champion. I know Roush probably isn't where Brad would like it to be, but they are going in the right direction. Chris Buescher's had some really good runs over the last couple weeks, and Brad has showed speed too, even though he hasn't gotten the results that he probably deserved. So Keselowski for the long shot, Ross Chastain as the actual winner bet. But just going through the odds here, I mean, there's a lot of people that you could probably take a look at. Ricky Stenhouse, Christopher Bell obviously was running good before the very end of the race here. Just about anyone you could probably make a case for to win this race. So it's going to be really interesting. And then you factor in the point situation and who needs to do what and who needs to play safe. And obviously a win gets you in, and that would really shake things up. It's a really, really hard race to handicap. I really don't know which way to go. It's a true wild card. Even at Daytona and Talladega, I think you have a better idea there than you do at Atlanta. Given this is only the second time here, it's just going to make it really difficult in terms of betting and going through who potentially could steal a win. Looking at the group bets for the Cup Series, we have in Group A Ross Chastain, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney all at plus 260, and William Byron at plus 270. Uh, Easy one for me since I picked Ross to win. We're going with Ross at plus 260. He's my guy I have to win the race. He's the guy I'm going with to win Group A. Group B, Kyle Larson plus 260, Kyle Busch plus 260, Joey Logano plus 260, Bubba Wallace plus 270. I'm going with Bubba. He was in position to win this race right up until the very end. Didn't get the finish he wanted, didn't bring the car home in one piece either, but he was there. And out of all of these guys, as of late, he seems to, you can make the argument here that he's the best plate racer out of all of them as of right now. I definitely put him in front of Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch. I don't necessarily know if with this new car, Joey Logano is what Joey Logano was, before. Mainly before they even adjusted the Gen 6 package. You have to go back a couple years now, back to like 2019, 2020, where you could really control the draft. It is a bit different now than it was then when you saw Joey have a lot of his success. I think a lot of people are going to point to Bubba and say, well, his one win was rain shortened, but he was still able to drive up through there. He was able to navigate the traffic and put himself in position when they had the crash and then the rain came to where he ultimately ended up winning that race. Again, he had a great run at Daytona, ran pretty good here in the spring. You're not going to get, in terms of like the odds here, you're not going to get a crazy odds number on him just because of the style of racing it is. But plus 270 in a group of four, I think it's a pretty solid pick. I'm going with Bubba Wallace. Group C, we have Denny Hamlin at plus 230, Daniel Suarez plus 260, Tyler Reddick at plus 260, and Christopher Bell at plus 300. Again, pretty easy one for me. Christopher Bell was in position to win this race at the very end, did get black flag, would have had top five. Tyler Reddick's probably the only other one that I look at in this group. He was leading as well when he had issues early in this race back in the spring. Had tire go down. Might not have been leading. He was up there. Regardless, he was up there when he had his issues. So that's probably the second guy I would look at. I think you could probably make a case for Denny Hamlin. He's good. He was running near the front when he had issues with Kyle Larson as well. So this one, probably, the hardest one to pick so far, but I'm going to go with the guy that had a top five all but wrapped up before he made a bad choice messing around with that double yellow line or red and white line, whatever color it is in Atlanta. But before he was messing with that line, Christopher Bell plus 300, the best odds or the longest odds in this group, but I think he has the best chance to finish ahead of everybody in this group. So we're going with Christopher Bell. And lastly, we have Group D, which is Martin Truex Jr. at plus 220, Kurt Busch at plus 270, Alex Bowman at plus 270, and Kevin Harvick at plus 290. This one's probably actually the hardest group. None of these guys really jump out to me anyways as, really good plate racers at this point in their career. Truex has never won. Kurt Busch, while he is near the front, only has one win in a points-paying race, I believe, and that was the Daytona 500 in 2017. Alex Bowman, he could be up there at times, but things never seem to go well with him. And Kevin Harvick, I think his last plate win was well over a decade ago at this point. I believe it was at Daytona in 2010. So it's been a while since he's won one of these races as well. I think by default here, I'm going to go Kurt Busch. He did finish third here in the spring race. Again, Truex did have a decent finish as well. He did finish in the top 10, but he just doesn't strike me as a plate racer. Alex Bowman also did finish in the top 10. But again, more often than not, he seems to run into problems. Kevin Harvick, as of right now, I'd probably put him behind Bowman in terms of just being able to run near the front, not necessarily get the finish, but run near the front in these races. So this is one that I'm personally probably going to stay away from in terms of actually betting. But if I have to bet somebody here, I'll go with Kurt Busch at plus 270. And lastly, moving over to the fantasy side for the Cup Series, another one, really hard to make a team given the type of race it is, but taking a look at it, we're starting off with Justin Haley, 6,300. Obviously, restrictor plate ace in the Xfinity Series. Cup Series, a bit of a different animal, but he did get a solid 11th place finish here in the spring. Pretty good, salary wise in terms of saving salary for him as well. So Justin Haley, 6,300, he's on the team. At 6,500, we have Brad Keselowski. Mentioned it, he's my long shot guy. Given the number that I see with him, somebody that I could trust at this style of racing, at least to keep his car clean. I'm sure there are some drivers after his performance at the Daytona 500 that would disagree in terms of keeping the field clean. But Brad at 6,500, I think the value's there. I know he's not having the season that he was hoping for, but too good to pass up at that price. Next up, we're taking Christopher Bell, 8,500. Again, was in position to have a really strong finish here before his unfortunate black flag at the end of the race. I think that's somebody where I really feel like he's going to have a pretty solid showing. Maybe he's not contending for the win, but I expect him to get a top 10. I think he's going to have a really strong day. Kind of needs it too, given the point situation that he's currently in with Tyler Reddick winning at Road America. Really, does actually put him on the bubble in terms of making the playoffs right now. So if he's not going to win a race, he's got to keep the points up in case he has to go chase down Martin Truex Jr. or even a Ryan Blaney. Next up, Bubba Wallace, 8,700. Again, was in position to win this race. Battled William Byron near the end here in the spring. I'm feeling pretty good. I think this is another guy. Bubba Wallace, he needs a good run. Obviously, he's in a position where he has to win. No chance he points his way in if he wants to make the playoffs. Must-win situation for Bubba. I think this could be one of those types of, boomer bust picks. He's either going to finish really good and contend, or he might be bringing back the steering wheel and costing your team a chance at any money. But Bubba Wallace, 8,700, he's on the team this week as well. Next to last guy, Tyler Reddick. Was running pretty good here in the first race, had tire issues coming off of that first career win. Big believer in momentum. 9,300, maybe a little bit pricey, especially because it's a plate track. I think I would understand this more if it was a oval or another road course. But he looked like he had a pretty good piece under him when they ran here back at the beginning of the year. So Tyler Reddick, 9,300. If there's a way to work him on the team, I wouldn't go too far out of the way. But if there's a way to get him on the team, somebody I would definitely take a look at. And lastly, rounding out the team, Ross Chastain, 10,300. He looked like he had the car to win a race, ran into problems, and then he still almost came back and won the race. Coming off of a pretty good performance at Road America. I think, while he's had his issues over the last couple weeks, specifically with Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott, I think he's beginning to possibly put that behind him. And, Ross did win Talladega. Granted, if you ask him, he didn't really do anything. He just kind of sat there and the seas kind of parted. But he was in position there. He was able to capitalize. And he was in position at the end of the day at Atlanta as well. So 10,300, again, a little bit pricey. But given that we were able to keep the salaries down with Justin Haley and Brad Keselowski, I think it's a decent pick, and it's easy to put together because we were able to save salary. So Ross Chastain also on the team, and I mean he is the guy I picked to win the race, so can't say it's that big of a surprise. So just taking a quick look again here at the points before we sign off, because this is really going to be the talking point for this race. Christopher Bell's the guy to watch. He's only 20 points ahead of Kevin Harvick right now. He has to run good. If he's not putting together a good day, it's a plate race. I know Kevin Harvick's really struggled at stage points this year, but you could get stage points. You can find a way to finesse stage points here at a plate track. 20 points, not a lot. And obviously, if somebody behind him or even Harvick himself goes out and wins the race, it's kind of a moot point. Because then instead of people chasing you, you're going to be chasing Martin Truex Jr., and that is a much steeper climb, especially with how Truex seems to be gaining speed over the last month or so, at least on the ovals. Toyota as a whole, they definitely have some problems on the road courses. But, Christopher Bell, he's really got to keep his nose clean here. I think Kevin Harvick's going to be coming at him all day. Eric Almirola obviously has had success at plate tracks. It's going to be really interesting. And, it wouldn't shock me if somebody like a Brad Keselowski, a Bubba Wallace, Ricky Stenhouse, Chris Buescher, the list goes on. There's so many people out there that you could take a look at, and they've run good. Maybe they don't necessarily have the wins at the plate tracks, but they've run good enough to where it wouldn't be shocking if they ended up putting their car in victory lane on Sunday. And I think the safest thing for Christopher Bell is to try to make sure he's the guy that does that. And if he is, assuming that, Blaney and Truex don't have trouble, what right now is a tight points battle, and even if somebody behind Christopher Bell picks up a win, you're still going to have a points battle between him and Truex, potentially. If Christopher Bell wins a race, the points don't matter anymore, assuming Truex doesn't have any problems. Right now, that's like a 60-point gap. That's basically a race. I think just looking at it real quick here, I think it's 61. So it's over a race, that the gap between Kevin Harvick and Martin Truex Jr. If Bell ends up winning this race, points don't matter anymore. You got to go out there and win. Well, there is a really narrow path for somebody like Kevin Harvick to squeak his way in on points right now. That 100% goes away if Bell wins. The points, the way in on points would go away if Christopher Bell wins for Harvick. Obviously, if somebody behind them wins, that line gets bumped up to Truex. His path for points goes away, but you still have the potential of a points battle with Truex and Bell. But, for Kevin Harvick, winning is first priority, obviously. But you're not in a situation yet where you have to throw everything away to go out there. You don't have to sell out for the win yet. That could change after Sunday, but going into the race, I think the number one thing is getting stage points in case something does happen. That way you at least have something to show for your day. And then maybe if you're just lucky enough to miss everything, you could go out there and try to contend for the win in the closing stages. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Bernie Breakdown. A bit shorter, but I think we touched up on everything. We'll be back later in the week after all the racing. We'll be sure to break down everything that happens from Atlanta and Mid-Ohio. And hopefully I'll have somebody as my co-pilot. It's a lot easier when you have somebody to bounce things off of, that is for sure. But until next time, guys, thanks for listening to the Bernie Breakdown, and we'll catch you around. Brandon Monroe here. Thanks for listening to the Bernie Breakdown. Remember to keep listening to us on your favorite podcasting platform. And remember to follow us at Bernie Breakdown on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and all of our other social media platforms.